Now officially back here with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres, and it is now time because this is going to be our new weekly thing when you get the crossover with Javier and I. We love doing these little drafts. It's a fun time. You get to make up a topic, and you get to just inject your opinion, a little bit of fun into the podcast. You know, not everything has to be super analytical, and we can still get analytical and really get into the nerdy nitty gritty stuff. But it also allows us to have a little bit of fun with a sport of baseball that could be black and white sometimes. So, Javi, for today, I actually have a real quarter.
Wow, he did it!
Yes. And now we're gonna, after last week, learning from our mistakes. Do you want heads or tails?
I'm sticking with tails. What can I say? I gotta stick with tails.
Here we go. All right, I dropped it. I got it right here. We're gonna flip it over. And it is, even after the flip, it's a tails for the YouTube audience. So Javi gets the number one pick. There is a clear-cut consensus number one pick of the top player or team that has exceeded expectations for 2023 after the last draft. Sometimes Javi likes to start hot, but then by the end, he's like, do I really want to win this thing? So we'll see how aggressive Javi wants to get on today's draft in terms of winning this thing. Javi, start us off.
First of all, I appreciate your backwards, sneaky way of making fun of me. That was excellent work by you.
Thank you.
It's tough because part of me wants to, do I pick a player or a team?
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to pick a team because I don't think that there's that many teams that are like, oh my gosh, there's some mildly surprising teams like yours, but I think the Diamondbacks were kind of like a sleeper for a lot of people. So for me though, because I think that there's only a couple teams that it fits, I'm going with the Miami Marlins as a whole. They have to be up there. I think that when you take into account how bad they splurged last offseason on in their relative terms on Jorge Soler and Avisail Garcia. And those guys were terrible. Jorge Soler was hurt. Garcia was hurt and terrible when he played, all sorts of things. And then they missed on so much, right? And then heading into this year, it's you have the Cy Young guy. But considering that your Cy Young pitcher, who we talked about last week, has been horrid, you would think if I just told you that one factoid, oh my gosh, are they even worse than the Nationals? No, in fact, they've been awesome this year. And a big reason for that, and I think Kim Ng and management deserves a lot of credit, Luis Arraez has been great. Jorge Soler, put in just a DH spot, has been great. Brian De La Cruz. I'm saying this because a good friend of mine is a Marlins fan, so I know, unfortunately, way too much about this team. And they've been getting big bullpen contributions on guys like AJ Puck, right? And, Jesus Luzardo has been very good for that team. They just have a lot of pieces and a lot of depth led by Arraez. And Arraez is this super fun player who just gets you 4 hits every single night. And it's awesome to watch. And I'm really amped for them because I think that on paper, that roster was definitely not supposed to be as good as it's been, and definitely not in second place in the National League East that has teams like the Phillies and the Mets. Mets being a 100-win team, Phillies making it to the World Series last year. For them to be 50-37, I think is absolutely tremendous, and they have such a good vibe to them too. So shouts to the Marlins, figuring out ways to get runs and win games. They're my biggest surprise. Don't know if it'll stick for the rest of the season, but as of right now, we're drafting first half. So that's what I'm going to pick. The full team, Miami Marlins.
Wow. I was a little bit surprised. I think they're a worthy pick. I do think they're a surprise. I don't know if they're my number one overall pick for surprises. A guy like Sully Baseball, he might have told you he had them picked for the postseason entering the season. I had very similar thoughts on both the D-backs and Marlins entering the year. I think I like the D-backs more, but I was like, you know what? Marlins are going to be competitive. They're going to have one of the best rotations in the National League. It's all about, can that offense get enough runs? And when you got a guy batting nearly 400 halfway through the season, he's going to supplement a lot of that offense. So I like the Marlins at number one overall. I don't think it would have been my pick, but yeah, they're definitely in consideration as one of the biggest surprises. I mean, I think the fact that they're in the NL East kind of devalues their how we view them a little bit, because they would lead 5 other divisions in Major League Baseball, but because they're in the division with the best team in the Atlanta Braves, it doesn't make them look as high on a pedestal as some other teams. So you just see them in first place, even though they may have the same or worse record than the Miami Marlins. So I do like the pick. I just don't know if I would have went with them number one, but now number 2 is actually kind of tough because I thought you would have taken one of these two.
I threw you off. Mind games, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you think I don't know how to draft, man? I'm throwing him off. Look at him. He's shaking in his seat.
Because now I'm like, I want to go with this one pick. There's one pick I want to go right here, but I'm actually going to go not with the heart here. I'm going to go with the brain because I'm trying to win this thing, Javi. I'm going with the brain. I'm going with a team that it's a little bit recency bias because of how hot they've been over the last month, but I'm going with the Cincinnati Reds, who are currently leading the NL Central. And that was a division where it's like coming into the year, we're like, okay, it's the St. Louis Cardinals to lose. Like we might have thought they were the biggest favorite, not because the Cardinals were the best team, but we just thought the 4 other teams in that division, at least 3 of them with the Cubs, the Reds, and the Pirates, are like, those are 3 teams that are just not going to be in the postseason. And the Brewers, they might try the first half of the season and then come to the deadline, trade away all their starting pitchers. So it was like, there was only one team I was interested in that I respected entering the season. Now I'm looking up and I'm like, the Reds only have 3 less wins than the D-backs. L.A. De La Cruz is probably going to finish runner-up to Corbin Carroll. Like, this Reds team does not have, like, any pitchers. I don't know how they do it, but they score runs. They play a really fun brand of baseball. They're kind of playing all the new baseball metrics with the speed and using a little small ball, getting chaotic on the bases, still playing great defense. So I think the Cincinnati Reds at more than halfway through the season, being in first place, almost 10 games above 500. I am shocked by this resurgence that they've had this year because I still, on paper, talent-wise, I think they're one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball, but yet they're leading their division, which I think is absolutely crazy.
It's a fair pick. I actually almost thought of picking what's his face, Ellie De La Cruz, and I know that sounds crazy, but just in the sense of how immediately good he's been. He just hit a home run. Fair. Actually, I have him in fantasy. It just feels like, and it's great, don't get me wrong, but it's like he's like already becoming this like top 20 player that everyone wants in the home run derby. So that was a little bit surprising. But yeah, I mean, the Reds, what I think they deserve a lot of credit for, unlike Oakland, which granted there's a bunch of reasons why this happened, cheap ownership, blah, blah, blah. They rebuilt perfectly. Yes, it was unfortunate the way they were competitive, and they have this weird obsession with making moves when they're bad, but when they're good, they don't make moves. It's very odd. I still haven't figured out what their philosophy is on that. But hey, they rebuilt really well, and they still have guys like Noelvi Marte. Like they still have the fruits of the Luis Castillo trade to be excited about. Not to mention Ellie De La Cruz, and just good overall vibes entirely. Jonathan India is pretty good. Their pitching staff is interesting, albeit flawed. They're very young, very raw talent, but that you cannot be happier. This is like peak, but even if they don't make the postseason, even if they don't win the division, I guarantee you Reds fans are already like, this is so much more than we could have asked for. So I think that they're just having a good old time. So shouts.
Yeah, might see Luke Weaver in a playoff rotation, which would be absolutely disgusting. Cruz was on my like long list. He did make like an honorable mention for me because we always say one baseball player can't change, your fortune or your franchise. I felt like De La Cruz has come up and just ignited that whole thing and sparked that and been the catalyst to that whole offense recently. So maybe one guy can at least make a little bit of an impact on the entire franchise. But who do you got? Number 3, Javi.
Number 3, I don't think I'm going to go with the one that you're thinking, but it's tough. It's tough, but I think, look, he has had success before, this player. He's had very good success before, specifically, using the right matchup. This team loves doing platoon matchups. They have a lot of solid players that do well for them. But even still, for a guy who had a 0.2 F4 last year, largely because he was hurt, and even before that, he was a 1.6. I'm going with the San Francisco Giant, Mr. Lamont Wade Jr., who is like, look, and again, let me stress, like he has been effective in certain situations before, 116 WRC plus 2 years ago, but last year not as good. And it was like, oh, okay, anybody can have just one good season. But this year, 141 WRC plus. And here's the kicker. What if I told you this man was just wow, look at me. I'm already getting sick just having to say what I'm about to say. What if I told you he was just discount, not without the name brand Juan Soto? This man has a 400 on base right now. 412 to be exact. He's, not slugging the ball as much as Soto, only 9 home runs on the season. But the fact that he's, walking nearly as much as he's striking out is incredible, given that this is kind of a no-name guy. And he's been really solid, don't get me wrong. Again, used in the right matches before, he has been effective. Any Giants fan will probably tell you that, but nonetheless, deserves to be up there. The fact that he is, let me see, I'm actually going to check right now. He is 4th in on-base percentage in Major League Baseball. Like, arise, okay. Soto, yeah, that makes sense. Acuna, that makes sense. Lamont Wade Jr., it's just pretty nuts and is a little bit of this like weird symbolic thing of how things are going for the Padres, where they had to give up all this stuff for Soto, and the Giants seems to have just plucked someone who, while not as good, as he certainly is worth more in value, considering everything that the Padres gave up. And I don't think the Giants gave up, all that much for Lamont Wade, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, I think he's my most surprising batter so far of 2023.
Wow, Javi just wants me to win this draft. I don't mind Lamont Wade at all. That was a solid pick. He coming off, if you compare him to last year, then yeah, he's having a night and day season. But if you go a little baseball reference and just check 2 years prior, he was an MVP candidate. If you care about 21st in MVP voting, tied with Buster Posey and Kevin Gausman, two former.
What was that, 2020?
Yeah, 2021 in 109 games. Yeah, he finished. Yeah, he got one vote.
Weird.
Yeah,
that's he got one vote. That does not count. How dare you?
He got 1 point. He got 1 point in the MVP voting. So we're saying an MVP candidate is exceeding expectations by doing what he's already done before.
Don't listen to him, ladies and gentlemen. Don't listen to him. He's trying to sway your opinion. Stop it.
That is crazy as the number 3 pick. Let me go with the correct pick that Javi should have won because, oh my God, at number 2 and number 4, I'm picking the 2 best values on the board still. Whew, this thing is shaking up just how I wanted to. Now we get to lean into my favorite thing, homerism, because at the number 4 slot, I'm drafting my team, the Arizona Diamondbacks. And why shouldn't I? Because at game
you're drafting the team.
Yeah, I'm taking the whole team. I have Corbin Carroll on the list, but because he was given a fat contract before the season and
I thought you were going to go Gurriel. That's what I thought you were going to do.
Gurriel's a solid pick. I do think he's put up similar numbers to. I honestly don't even know why he's been voted into the. He has like all-star level numbers, but he's put up numbers similar to this before. So I'm surprised this is like the year for him. Even though he is having like a little bit of a breakout season. But I'm going with the D-backs because entering the year, I did think they were going to take a step forward. But I thought a perfect season for the D-backs was going to be 500 team. Just keep me interested August, September. Just keep me 4 games back with 3 weeks left to play. And I would have been happy from this D-back season. But now we're at like what, game 85, 86, 87? We're more than halfway through this thing. And the D-backs, not a commanding lead, okay? But even after going below 500 in their last 20 games, they're still leading this division by a couple games. And they're doing it over the Dodgers, the Padres, the Giants, teams that are not afraid to spend money, teams that are not afraid of commitment to winning. Like those are stellar franchises or teams that are putting it all on the line when it comes to putting money on the field. Those guys are not afraid to spend money. Those guys are not afraid to go out there and make a big move in the offseason or deadline. And the D-backs have just been clutching their purse, building this thing homegrown, trying to get the talent through the farm system, and it's worked. They've been hitting on these cheap guys, a couple relievers in free agency. Everything has clicked for the D-backs. So am I surprised that they're having like above 500 season? No, but more than halfway through the year, they look like the second best team in the National League as it currently stands and the best team in the division. I am surprised by that. Got nothing
bad,
for me?
Sir. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Not bad at all.
Yeah.
Shall I just continue? So you've taken 2 teams so far, and I've taken a team and a player. I took the Marlins and I took Lamont Wade Jr. I think that listeners are going to say that I'm winning currently, but it's okay. We're going to keep it going. This is tough. This next one's tough, but you know what? I'm following in your steed, and I'm going with some homerism as well. I'm going with a pitcher. And I was going back and forth between I wanted to take this guy or another guy that might get picked later, but I am picking him. And the big reason I'm picking him especially is because I did not think that he was going to be good. Specifically outside of my podcast, I thought last year, his expected stats, last year, 3.32 ERA, his expected ERA was 4.56. That's a pretty big jump, especially when you consider he is a pitcher that has not been all that great over his career. So it kind of adds up. Ooh. Michael Wacha is who I'm picking. Of the San Diego Padres, 2.84 ERA on the season. That is the 11th best in baseball from what I am looking at, behind Garrett Cole and just ahead of Blake Snell. He's been awesome. He's been money. And I think the big thing, I already talked about the expected stats, but the fact that they signed this guy who was somehow still available, Padres had rotation questions. They somehow just were able to acquire him like 2 weeks before spring training starts. I think that's added on to it as well. You know, when it's always weird when players, come in late, the NFL, this happens sometimes. You don't feel great about it, that they only just started practicing and all that. Well, that's part of it for Waka, and for him to come in and be as dominant as he's been. And I don't think it's all that fluky, really. Yes, he's going to regress a little bit. I don't think this is a Cy Young contender or anything, but he's outpitching some of his metrics, and he's been not very good for so long that I didn't expect him. I thought he was going to fall back to being a low fours ERA guy who can throw innings and be effective at times. His changeup can be really great, but I think that just the way he's been, especially for a team that everyone thought was going to have a problem at the back of the rotation, I got to go Michael Waka.
I don't mind Waka at all going there. He is coming off like a pretty solid season for the D-backs already. I think in terms of when you think about expectations for Waka, I mean, the fact that he's repeating what he did for the Red Sox, I mean, because this is someone that coming up when he first broke into the league, we had thought he was going to be a future star pitcher. And then it was like a few years there where he just kind of fell into mediocrity and he just kind of fell off the face of the earth, it felt like. And now he's back and he looks like a stud. He's arguably what? After Blake Snell, would you say he's your second most trustworthy pitcher from what you've seen this year?
Yeah. So far, I personally still am putting Musgrove up above him, but I mean, I would understand if people wanted to put up Waka instead because he's just been steady the whole way.
Yeah, like if this is your first year watching the Padres, or you're like, Waka is the second best pitcher we have.
That's that. He is him, as the kids say.
He is him. Yeah, I don't mind Waka. First pick that I've liked in a while by Javier Reyes during this draft. So good job by you, friend. Michael Waka, fantastic, going number 5, but it's coming off a pretty damn good year. So the fact, is it exceeding expectations when you come off an all-star level year? I don't know. That's for the listeners to decide, I guess. A lot of options for me here at number 6. I could go with another team. I could go with my first player as well. I could get kind of crazy with it if I really want to, but I think I will go with a player here. I think I will go with a pitcher. I'm going with a guy who wasn't, maybe if you're a deep baseball nerd, if you're a guy who likes prospects and rookies, you are in on this guy, but this is someone who I think he lost his rookie eligibility, but didn't pitch a ton last season. He's going to be a first-time All-Star this year on a team that's sending like 15 other people, but he's the least well-known of this group. He wasn't really on my radar entering the year because you had just so many dudes in that lineup. You had the Kyle Wrights and the Max Frieds already in that rotation. But I'm going with Bryce Elder, who has been fantastic in that Braves. And I think coming into the year, though, the whole talk in that rotation, if you're talking about a young guy in that rotation popping, it was all Spencer Strider, right? The strikeout phenom, who is having a great season with the strikeouts and everything like that. But you had Fried, you had Wright, you had Spencer Strider. You had 3 young studs in their prime in that rotation. You even had old man Charlie Morin to round out your top 4. But the guy who really didn't get discussed was Bryce Elder. And he's come in and he just looked dominant since day one. He's going to be a first-time All-Star. And he's been a huge part of why the Braves have been so good this year, because the Max Frieds and the Kyle Wrights have been on like 60-day IL for like the entire season. It feels like those guys have each only had a handful of starts this year. So if Bryce Elder isn't as good as he is right now, maybe that Braves team is still probably leading that division, but maybe it's a neck and neck race with the Miami Marlins. So I think Bryce Elder has been a huge X factor for that Braves team this year. I don't think he was on a lot of people's radars as maybe the X factor for that team.
Yeah, I mean, that totally fits. Yes, I could be mean like you and say, oh, you're surprised that the Braves developed more talent. But I mean, the fact that he's this good so immediately, I think is, no matter who it is, I don't care what team it is, anytime a guy comes up and is good immediately, we see all the time. And you're Anthony Volpe's, right? Like he came up and he's been showing sparks lately, and I think he's going to be a good player, but it just shows you most often Bobby Witt Jr., who we drafted in our last episode, or at least I did, that's not always immediate. And that's fine. That doesn't mean that Bryce Elder is a stud for 10 years to come. There are plenty of people. Former Padre Will Myers literally won Rookie of the Year, right? And he wasn't nearly as productive a player as you would think, given that he was a Rookie of the Year winner. So I like the pick. It's your first player. May I remind the jurors that this man has taken 2 teams and questionable teams and not a single player until now. So I'm just throwing it out there. Look at him. He's shocked. He said, what?
Let's hear who you have for number 7 then. Let's hear your unquestioned number 7.
it's got to be a guy who has literally been a journeyman for so long, since the age of 21. This guy wasn't even getting luck with the Dodgers, right? I wanted to pick another guy, but I forgot that this guy has been so much better. It is of one of the best teams in baseball, and that is Luke Raley of the Tampa
Okay.
Bay Rays. He has been a stud. 276, 358, 578 slash line. That's a 161 WRC plus, one of the best overall offensive players in baseball. And that is a crazy thing to say. Just flat out unbelievable stuff. Don't get me wrong. The one thing that you could go against this is saying, hey, this is just the classic Rays, right? The Rays love doing this like all the time, but I don't care. This guy was a journeyman. He was started in the Dodgers when he was 21 years old, left there, went to Minnesota for AA, went back to the Dodgers for half a second, then went back to Minnesota, then Minnesota began and traded all over the place until eventually ending up with the Rays. And yes, he'd been effective in the minors. So maybe this is one of those guys that people just didn't give a chance. That happens every now and then. Former boy of your team, JD Martinez, comes to mind, a guy who had always been successful, but then, you know, the Astros didn't trust him. And then finally the Tigers gave him a shot. Then he goes to Arizona, then Boston, and the rest is history. But maybe he's one of those guys. It's totally possible. Every now and then, even at 28 years old, you get late bloomers like this. So shouts to Luke Raley. I think he deserves a lot of credit. I was going back between him and somebody else that I might even take after this too. But yeah, man, good stuff. Shouts to Luke Raley, my guy.
That's a fantastic pick, actually. I'm actually really jealous of that one because when you try to filter stats, I don't think he's played enough games, so he actually doesn't qualify on a lot of the leaderboards. So I'm saying that in terms of I overlooked him, which I think was a misstep.
Yeah. And in fairness, before people freak out, he has played 66 games. I didn't just take like a 5-game sample size and freak out. It has been a decent enough, but yes, he doesn't qualify as much as others.
No, yeah, he's on that. He's on one of my fantasy teams, and he's been phenomenal for me off the waiver wire. I really respect the Luke Raley pick. I can't even talk any crap on that. And I might go back to back with Tampa Bay Rays players because there's a couple you could choose here, but I don't feel good about that. Like, I don't want to take a player off a team I already drafted either because I could go with Corbin Barrels, but I'm not going to do that. I don't want to draft any players from teams I took already, but I think I will stay with a player here. And I will take a player off a team you drafted, though, from the Miami Marlins. I will actually go with Luis Ariz, who you may say he's not exceeding expectations because he was like the AL leader in batting average last year, 313 or whatever. Yeah, you say, but he was like a 780 OPS guy. Yeah, he batted 313. But if I told you he was going to bat 390 more than halfway through the season, like if you were like, the expectation for him to bat 310. If I'm telling you he's batting the greatest average in the last 200 years of Major League Baseball with the 900 plus OPS, all of a sudden he's on base slugging is way
selling me on it.
Yeah, I think when you traded him for Pablo Lopez, you didn't think you were gonna get a 400 hitter back. Yeah. So when you add that magical offensive prowess that he's done this year into that lineup of the Miami Marlins, who we've just discussed is tied with the D-backs with 50 wins, I think Ariz, who we had expectations of maybe being like an all-star level player, but now people are like, is he the MVP of the National League or probably runner-up to Ronald Acuna? I don't think anyone would have said he's an MVP finalist just off the season he had last year. I mean, I actually wondered how many MVP votes he got last year, but I think he's greatly exceeded expectations for what we have for Ariz entering this year.
Totally fair. Considering just how good he's been, right? And I think that, again, regardless of what your expectations were and whatnot, in a similar vein to regardless if you were a high prospect, being good immediately is amazing. Regardless of what the guy is, hitting 399, like, it's just pretty wild. We just don't have players like that anymore. Yes, we have your batting average champions, but just not to this extent where he's just fully bought in. And I love him because I love that. And we've talked about this before. Like, you pull up his StatCast profile, it's not all that impressive looking, but he's a great reason for why StatCast profiles do not tell you the full story. Just a peak example. He's just a hitter's hitter. He's fantastic and a big reason for why the Marlins have been so good.
Yeah, I love the top half of this draft for me, but I'm not going to lie. The second half of this draft, I think you've taken over, Javi. So how are you going to wrap us up with your last pick? Because I'm a little scared depending on who you might pick here.
This is tough. There's a couple guys you could go with here. I think that you could go with another Tampa Bay Ray. I want to, but it's not that fun. You know what I mean? It's not fun to go with another Ray. I'll leave him for honorable mentions. Instead, I'm going to go with, I think.
Okay.
I think I'm 99% sure that this is where I'm going, but I just want to check one thing.
Okay.
I think that
just do it already.
This player, I think it would shock a lot of people that with their budget, with all the money they've spent, that he, with the exception of one guy who's only played 2 games, if you look at the record,
I might know. Let me see.
It is Tommy Pham.
Okay,
of the New York Mets. I am bringing it back to the Padres while also shouting out the Mets. Millard, what if I told you that if you go by WRC Plus, that he is currently the leader on the entire Mets team, a team that includes Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Mark Canha, Jeff McNeil, who won the batting title last year, Starling Marte, who was excellent last year as well. I think considering he's been one of the best as of right now, offensive players on that team, Pete Alonso is great too. Don't get me wrong. Like it's a minuscule difference. Pete Alonso has a 136 and that's just one area, hits a lot of clutch home runs, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that he's that good and for this team, I think is really surprising, especially considering that these past couple years, he has really struggled. In a lot of ways, he struggled with the Padres. Obviously the whole thing with the Giants was weird. Shout out to Jack Peterson. That was weird. 89 WRC plus last year, 102 in 2021. And most of that came from the first half. I can tell you that as someone who watched the Padres, like he was dreadful in the second half. I think that in the team context is important for this pick too. If this was a random team, I don't think I would have gone with him. But I think considering how many other players are on this team, that he's leading them in so many categories, that's going to be my last pick.
I went to the D-backs versus Mets game on July 4th and saw Tommy Pham, but if you asked me just now what team does Tommy Pham play for, I don't think I would have had an answer for you because I still forgot he was playing for the New York Mets. And looking at he's having a pretty darn good season, his best since 2019. Because if you're talking about exceeding expectations, he's been he's been a below average mediocre player for a few seasons now. The last time Tommy Pham was a good player was pre-pandemic, which at this time was a half decade ago. So I would agree, and I think if he's the best player in your team leading in WRC plus, you probably got to throw out the rest of the team. You're probably a team that needs to tank and try to get that #1 draft pick because Tommy Pham should not be your best offensive player unless your team name is like the Oakland A's or something like that. So sorry to the New York Mets fans. Sorry to Stephen Cohen. That man has been signing checks left and right. He has not seen the return on
trying, man. Yeah.
Where's the ROI, Steven? I am so sorry for that. So number 9, Tommy Pham. So this is how the draft has went so far. Number 1 to Javi, Marlins. Number 2 to me, Reds. You, Lamont Wade. Me, D-backs. You, Waka. Me, Elder. You, Luke Rayleigh. Me, Luis Ariz at number 8. Then you, Tommy Pham, number 9. And then number 10 to round out our draft. Whew, we got some options here. Let me give you some honorable mentions of teams and players that I'm not going to choose but are in consideration for this number 10 pick. I mean, I considered Tampa just because of the hot start that they had to the season, the historic start. Yandy Diaz, if you're talking about Rays players, he's been phenomenal. Stroman, just because back to being a Cy Young. I mean, he's coming off a good season, but being a Cy Young, maybe. Of course, let's put Corbin Barrels down. No, the Rangers, they spend a lot of money, but they're coming off not a great season. You can put the Giants, or if I were like Perdomo, maybe. But I'm not going to go with any of those teams. I'm going with the team that entering the season, they propped
another team.
I love
another team. I'm so surprised. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think teams are more fun. I don't know. It's easier to talk about the team because I don't watch. It's not like I'm sitting here watching Luke Rayleigh, 162. It's easy for me to give an analysis and take about a team and a specific player. So I'm going with a team that propped up 3 youngsters, rookies entering the year. And so far, they're having solid years, but they're not exactly dynamite. But yet, they've been able to keep pace with the Tampa Bay Rays in the AL East this whole season. I'm going with the Baltimore Orioles, who they had a chance to make the postseason last year. Kind of has the same vibes as the D-backs. But still, if you look at that team on paper in terms of talent entering the year. I don't think that was some playoff lock roster or anything like that. I think that was a team that was probably between 78 and 85 wins that had potential for more growth to get around 88 and maybe make it into one of those final wild card spots if they weren't going to trade all their good players at the deadline first. And now the Canoes, the Batistas, they've been really good. Rushman's been solid, but like the Gunnar Hendersons, he's been all right. Grayson Rodriguez hasn't exactly popped. So like all the guys that we were really excited for this year, like they've been just fine. It's been all the other pieces, the Austin Hayes of the world and the Santanders, the Anthony Santanders. I don't know how he's got that name like that bank on the East Coast, if you know what I'm talking about. So the Orioles are going to be my final pick for this draft just because, I mean, there's 49 wins. They're right there with the D-backs in terms of wins, and they're only like 6 games back of the Rays, who started like 59-1 to start the season. So very impressive by the Baltimore Orioles this year.
Excellent stuff, man. Do you have any final like honorable mentions you want to shout out?
No, I think I already named them all unless you got any. Maybe Acuna, just because it's such a historic season. But
I would say if we could do specific, say like the 40 steals already. You know what I mean? Like all the stuff he's doing, but specifically the fact that you have that many steals is pretty nuts. I really think that I murdered this draft. I really do. But I do have a couple leftovers.
I like your second half.
Yeah. Thank you. Yandy Diaz, already talked about him. There's a great article for Yahoo Sports talking about, and honestly, it's a great article worth talking about in general, which is kind of like talked about how he's always been an on-base guy, but he added more power. And it's funny because he's this jacked guy, but his thing has always just been he's humongous, but he's Yandy. I mean, it's a great, awesome guy. But like he's mostly been batting average on base, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it was interesting how the article kind of tested to he was ready to take that chance with changing his swing to be more power oriented after he got a little bit of an extension. You know what I mean? They gave him a contract, so maybe gave him more confidence to maybe change what was working to potentially make him better, to take that risk, dare I say, with his batting thing. So I think there's a lot that people can learn from that little story. Go check that out, Yahoo Sports. It's really good. Nate Eovaldi, one of those always had the talent, and you always watched him going, why isn't this guy good? Except I didn't pick him because he was good last year. He was effective. It feels like the Red Sox fixed him and did some stuff. So I didn't pick him, but even still, he's on there. Cody Bellinger, a little bit. I know. He hasn't been that great. So low. Because the standards are so low. He's batting 278 right now, or 280 right now with a 338 on base. He has gotten hurt a little bit. 111 WRC plus. Again, not that incredible, but considering this guy, I mean, Millard. He had an 83 WRC plus last year, and the year before a 47. Like
he was bad.
It's worth at least bringing up. And then the last one, he's so cool and we like him so much, and he's literally won an MVP before, but still a little bit at this age. Andrew McCutchen being one of, dare I say, the prime like headliners of this year's trade deadline. You know, like he's probably going to be one of the top guys. He's hit really well. He's doing well for a DH. I know that my team could use a DH really badly. Wink, wink. AJ Preller, if you're going to go for it. I don't think you should, but I think he's going to. And that's kind of the guy to go for. Third on the team in WRC plus. Basically second if you don't count Nick Gonzalez, who's played like 4 games for them. But really good stuff. And it's delightful too. I like that he's good for them. They deserve something over there.
Yeah, for the listeners, if you're trying to decide who won this draft, Javi just gave you a little peek into his psyche, saying a former MVP is exceeding expectations. Shocker by Javi.
I can't believe you tried to pull this guy got 1 MVP vote. You're telling me a former. I was like, what?
Look, finished 3rd, 1st, 3rd, and 5th, and he's exceeding expectations. Andrew McCutchen. That is Javier Reyes for you of Locked On Padres. Javi, where can the listeners find you in these wonderful takes and analysis?
Waka waka, man. What can I say? You can find me at Javapeno, JAVIIPENO, as long as we are permitted to do that on the old Bird app. Who knows what's going to happen, but check that out at LO_Padres for the Padres account. And, Locked On Padres on YouTube to see what's going on there. Almost at 1,000 subs, so please subscribe. I like seeing the numbers go up. It's very satisfying. And other than that, I leave you all with a very funny tweet that I saw the other day. If you are watching the YouTube, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there, and is this Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC flag. It made me laugh a lot. Go check out my account for more great content like that.
Yeah, go follow
And I hope everyone enjoyed the holiday in all seriousness.
Yeah, hope you guys pounded them glizzies at the holiday. Hope everyone had a good time, watched some baseball, ate some hot dogs, and drank some beer. At Creator Thomas 24 for the personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks both Twitter and Instagram. Another week, another draft, another crossover with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. Until next week, sir. Deuces.